Hi guys, Matt Easton here. A question that has come up in the comments of a number of my videos when I've been talking about weapons like the Warhammer here, or indeed like the mace, okay, is whether it is better in unarmoured fighting to use a weapon like this. In other words, which is more effective, a weapon like this or a sword, okay? And for me this is a very simple and easy question to answer. In actual fact, it is the sword. Okay, there are a number of reasons for why the sword was the preferred weapon for unarmoured, shall we say civilian, or places where they didn't wear much armour, combat. Firstly, these weapons, like the mace and the warhammer, are specialised for hitting people wearing armour. Okay, these are really, yes, you can use a club, you can use a baton, you can use one of these against an unarmoured person quite very effectively. Yeah, you hit someone in the head with one of these and very clearly they're going to go down 9 times out of 10. You can kill someone very easily with a mace or with a warhammer. However, it has a number of disadvantages in an unarmoured civilian context compared to the sword. First of all, there is the simple fact that the sword is very easy to wear. Okay, you can wear it in a scabbard, at your belt, and walk around with it all day. It's a relatively light object, it's nicely balanced, the weight is generally towards the hilt end, it doesn't swing around and hit you in the leg repeatedly or painfully, and they're easy things to carry around. But, and whereas a mace or a warhammer is kind of not very easy to wear and not very comfortable to wear because they would swing around uncomfortably and all the weight is at one end. But even in a one-on-one fight, the sword has many advantages over the percussion weapons such as the mace or warhammer. First of all, the ease of wounding the opponent. Okay, now the mace and warhammer, yes, it can break bones, it can cause all sorts of nasty damage to a person's body. However, to kill someone with one blow, with one of these, you're basically limited to either injuring their head or their spinal cord. Okay, so back of the neck, some other parts of the spine down the back, I imagine, or the head. Yes, you could break their arms, you could break their legs, you could incapacitate them before hitting them in the head. However, a sword can cause instant death with all sorts of hits on a person's body at all sorts of locations. You can hit them basically anywhere in the head, with the edge, with the front edge, the back edge, or the point with the thrust, anywhere in the head or throat. You can thrust them many places in the torso that will cause death. You can chop one of their limbs straight off. You can chop someone's hand off and they will die of blood loss. You can chop into someone's upper arm or upper leg and it will cause an arterial bleed out quite quickly. So there are all sorts of ways whereby if you hit someone with a sharp-edged and sharp-pointed sword, either with a cut or a thrust, they will die. They, as I've said in previous videos, they may not die instantly, but they're going to die, okay, unless they get very, very urgent medical attention. However, whilst this might break bones and might incapacitate people, most of the blows that you deal to someone's body in a fight, for example, to hit someone in the head is a relatively difficult thing. Humans, through millions of years of evolution, have learned to protect their heads fairly well, and the head is fairly far away from your opponent. The things which are closer to your opponent usually are your arms, your shoulders, and sometimes your legs are easier to get to as well. So in actual fact, most blows in most fighting in weapon arts land on the limbs, in my experience, and archaeologically proven as well, and what most people find in most combat sports and martial arts today using weapon-based martial arts. So most of those blows are going to be more lethal with a sword than they are with a mace. Next, the actual weapons themselves. Well, the mace has all of its weight at the hitting end. That makes it fairly slow to swing. Okay? The sword has most of its weight at the hilt end. It is nicely balanced. It is fast to swing, fast to move. In defence, equally, this is slower to defend with than this is, for the same reason aforementioned. Okay? This is more nimble in the end of the blade, quicker to move around, than a mace is. A mace has more inertia at the end, that means it hits with more force at the end, but it is therefore slower to move around. Okay, next up, reach. Maces and warhammers, certainly of this kind, tend to be short. Okay, we're comparing like with like. Clearly, if we're looking at pole weapons, that's a whole different kettle of fish. A poleaxe is generally a more dangerous weapon than a sword. However, you can't conveniently carry a poleaxe around because they're too long, too cumbersome, they get in the way, and it wasn't socially accepted to carry a weapon like a poleaxe or a halberd around. Okay, so these short weapons that you carry around, you can't really make these one-handed maces and warhammers very practical and easy to carry around unless they're relatively short. Okay, there are some types of maces and indeed some types of warhammers which are longer and which have lighter heads. However, that's a different kind of weapon, and you're starting to essentially there deal with something which moves faster but has less mass, so there's a trade-off there, and it actually starts to become a bit more like a sword, but you're still only hitting with a head, you're only hitting with the end of it, you don't have a fully edged blade. Okay, for those reasons mentioned, swords have always been far more popular for unarmoured fighting and far more popular in civilian situations than things like maces and warhammers. Maces were carried as a badge of office, and in fact, as I've mentioned in a previous video, they were carried by enforcers of law. In many different countries you see essentially an iron bar type weapon carried in Japan for law enforcement. Obviously truncheons and batons you all know from modern police, and these evolved from the earlier mace carried by medieval older men to enforce the law, and probably they were carried largely because they were a non-lethal way of incapacitating someone and taking them prisoner. So you could break their arms and their legs, could even concuss them in the head, but you're not going to cause huge bleeding wounds like a sword would that are essentially going to kill them either from disease or bleeding out. Okay, so there we go. To cut a long story short, in an unarmoured fight, unlike you might see in fantasy films where they decide one guy's going to have a sword and another guy's going to have an axe and another guy's going to have a mace, it doesn't really work like that. Swords were massively more popular for those who could afford them, which by the medieval period was basically everyone, because they are better weapons for fighting unarmoured and they're easier to carry around. Okay, these are weapons of war primarily for hitting people in armour. They're not really optimised for unarmoured fighting. Good, thank you.